Hi and welcome back to Farithkowo to my Court of the Lamp series. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. In the background I prepared some of the more interesting moments from my hands for Leshy and Heket, so there will still be chaos, violence, questionable dodging and probably some very professional panic. But instead of doing normal gameplay commentary, I want to talk about the story behind Cult of the Lamp. Because in the last episode we defeated the final bishop Shamura, then we faced the one who waited. He looked at everything I had built, all of Woolhalla, all of my loyal followers, all of my terrible decisions, and basically said, very nice, now sacrifice yourself. And I did not like that proposal. So naturally, we had a serious theological discussion with weapons. And somehow, after all of that, the one who waits lost the argument, the old faith collapsed, and apparently I am the god of death now. Which felt slightly dramatic for someone who spent half this game cleaning poop, cooking fish stew, and trying to stop my followers from losing their minds. But after finishing the main story, I realized something. I felt like I did not talk enough about what was actually happening here. Because if you only play through the fights, build the card, unlock decoration, feed your followers, and run through the dungeons, it is very easy to miss how tragic the story actually is. A lot of the lore is hidden in short dialogues, enemy lines, small details, ancient tablets, side characters, and things you can very easily miss while trying not to die. And if you did not read what the bishop and their followers were actually saying, then honestly, you might not really know who we were fighting. At first, the bishops just look like strange eldritch bosses standing in the way of our little cult. Leshy is the angry worm in Darkwood. Heket is the angry frog queen of Anura. Kallamar looks like anxiety with tentacles. And Shamura is basically a cosmic spider with a migraine and unresolved family trauma, which honestly explains a lot. At first, they felt like monsters guarding different parts of the world. You enter their domains, fight through their followers, collect bones, accidentally destroy half the room, and eventually kill them. Simple. But Cult of the Lamp, it's not really that simple. Because before the bishop, there was something even older. The world of Cult of the Lamp did not begin with Leshy, Heket, Kallamar, Shamura, and Narinder. Before them, there were the first gods, ancient beings who shaped the land of the old faith long before our little lamp ever walked to the altar. They created mountains, they formed rivers, they separated these lands from the rest of the world. And in this world, the land itself responds to power, which is terrifying concept by the way. Because apparently, if you are powerful enough, the world does not just fear you, it changes for you. The first god shaped the land according to their will, and then they disappeared. Nobody really knows exactly what happened to them. They vanished, leaving behind divine tools, icons, tears, crowns, weapons, and all of the dangerous leftovers of a much older age, very responsible of them. Before disappearing completely, the last of the first gods created three feathered guardians, Clowncheck, Kudai, and Chimak. These three were not supposed to rule. They were not supposed to crave devotion. They were not supposed to become gods themselves. They were meant to guard what the first god left behind. Clowncheck became the keeper of fate. Kudai became the keeper of the forge, weapons, and curses. And Chimak became the keeper of crowns, which is probably the most dangerous job in entire world. Because in Cult of the Lamp, crowns are not just fancy hats. Crowns are power, crowns are goodhood, crowns are the kind of things that turns a random creature into a divine problem, and the feathered guardian were created to be natural. They were not supposed to desire the divine, which, as we can see, went perfectly because eventually Chimak lost her way, she abandoned her duty, she became obsessed with divinity, relics, and the remains of gods. And when the keepers of crowns stop keeping the crowns, things get complicated. The crowns were lost, and once the crowns were lost, anyone who found one could become a god. Not a chosen god, not a rightful god, just someone who found power and took it, which is honestly very good of the lamp. And this is where the bishops come in. They were not the first gods. They were not ancient creatures of the world. They were gods who found power after something older had already fallen apart. Gods without divine right. Shamura, still young then, found a crown caught in their web. Leshy found one too, maybe it found him, and over time a small group of crowned gods formed. Shamura was the oldest, then Kalmar, then Narinder, then Heket, and finally Leshy, the youngest. Together they become known as the bishops of the old faith. Five gods, five crowns, five rulers who were not really supposed to exist in the way they did. And instead of looking at this stolen divine power and thinking, maybe we should be careful, they decide to become the only god left. Because apparently, divine politics in this world is just regular politics with more murders. The bishops began a purge. Other gods were hunted, destroyed, devoured, hidden away, or forced into silence. Sanctuaries fell, followers were stolen, crowns vanished, and eventually the bishops became the dominant power in the pantheon. For thousands of years they ruled. They shaped the land according to their will, and those lands became known as the lands of the old faith. So when we walk into Darkwood, Anura, Anchor Deep, and Silk Cradle, we are not just entering random game biomes. We are walking through a world shaped by gods who rose from the ruins of an older divine age. A world built on stolen crowns, lost duties, dead gods, and very questionable career choices, which makes our tiny little cult feel underqualified. But Woolhalla has never let qualification stop it before. Now, after all of that, the bishops were not always broken the way we see them in the game. They were powerful, they were feared, they were worshipped, they ruled together. Not exactly as siblings by blood, but as something close to divine family. A very old, very powerful, deeply dysfunctional divine family, which honestly explain even more. There was Leshy, the bishops of chaos, Heket, the bishops of famine, Kalmar, the bishop of pestilence, Shamura, the spider-like bishop of war and knowledge, and Narinder, the bishop of death, the one who we know as the one who waits. And Narinder is where everything starts falling apart. Because Narinder was different. The other bishops rule over terrible things, yes, chaos, famine, pestilence, war, knowledge, but all of those things are still part of life. They change, they move, they create suffering, but they are still connected to the living world. Narinder ruled over that, and that is different, that is final, that does not negotiate, that waits. But Narinder did not want to simply wait. Over time, he became dissatisfied with his role, while the followers of other bishops prayed for safety, harvest, health, long lives, knowledge, or protection. Narinder's domain was the end. of all of things. He began to question that. He wanted more. He wanted change. He wanted to break the old laws. He wanted to open a door between life and death and allow mortals to return, which, from a follower's perspective, must have sounded amazing. Imagine worshipping a god who says, "Follow me, and death might not be the end." That is very powerful promise. Safety is nice, food is nice, knowledge is nice, but coming back from that, yeah, I can see why his cult was gaining followers. That was exactly the problem. Narinder's devotion was growing, his influence was spreading, his ideas were dangerous, not only because they were powerful, but because they threatened the balance between the gods. Shamura, in love and recklessness for their brothers, supported some of his ideas, which makes this even sadder, because at first it was not simply everyone against Narinder. There was affection there, there was loyalty, there was family, but Narinder's experiments went too far. He was not questioning his role, he was trying to break the natural order. And once a god of death starts experimenting with the boundary between life and death, things probably stop being a normal family disagreement. At some point, Kalmar discovered Narinder's plans, and Kalmar, being Kalmar, panicked, which is very on brand. He warned to the others, and then the bishops decided that Narinder had to be stopped. So they made a plan. They gathered at Shamura's temple, and Shamura, who was the eldest and probably the brightest of them, led the plan to imprison him, which is important because Shamura was not just another bishop. Shamura was the bishop of war and knowledge, the one associated with strategy, memory, intelligence, violence, and understanding. So when the story says Shamura was in charge of the plan, it makes sense. But it also makes what happened to Shamura later even more tragic. The bishops found Narinder. The battle lasted for days. The earth trembled, and in the end, the four bishops defeated him, created four chains, each tied to one of their lives, and used them to sing Narinder away in the gateway. The one who waits was imprisoned, but the price was terrible. Leshy lost his eyes, Heket lost her throat, Kallamar lost his ears, and Shamura's skull was split, destroying their mind. See no evil, speak naught, hear nothing, think none. That line is honestly one of the most brutal parts of the lore. Because suddenly the bishops are not just bosses anymore. They are wounded gods. Leshy cannot see. Heket can barely speak. Kalmar cannot hear. And Shamura, one of the brightest of the five, is mentally shattered. And these wounds do not heal. They are divine wounds, inflicted during a divine war, and they become part of them. Their crowns and powers adapt to the injuries, but they are never whole again. So when we meet them in the game, we are not meeting gods of their peak. We are meeting what is left of them, still powerful, still worshipped, still dangerous, but broken. And that changes everything. Because Leshy is not just an angry worm in the woods. He is the youngest of the fight, desperate to prove himself, rolling in the darkness after losing his sight. Heket is not just an angry frog boss. She is consumed by rage, cut at the throat, still trying to let what remains of her family. Kalmar is not cowardly and nervous because it is funny. He's paranoid, afraid, and permanently marked by the part he played in Narinder's imprisonment. And Shamura. Shamura is probably the saddest of all, because Shamura remembers fragments. They remember Narinder, they remember the war, they remember what happened, but their mind is broken. So when Shamura speaks, it feels different. It, it is not just a villain monologue, It felt like listening to someone who is trapped inside pieces of their own memory. Which is why during the fight, I was not always sure if Shamura was treating me, giving me prophecy, or experiencing cosmic sleep deprivation. Maybe all three. And the more I think about it, the more the bishops do not feel like evil gods who simply deserve to die. They feel like gods who made a terrible choice out of fear and then spent 1,000 years living inside the consequences. They imprisoned Narinder because they feared what he would become. But by doing so, they destroy themselves too. And then there is Narinder himself, the one who waits. At first, he feels like the obvious villain. He saved the lamp, but not of kindness. He gives us the red crown. He brings us back from death. He tells us to build a cult in his name. He orders us to kill the bishops. He watches, waits, and speaks like someone who has already decided how everything will end. So, yes, from the beginning, he is using us. And to be fair, he absolutely is. But he is also not just someone random evil entity. He was one of them. He was family. He was the fifth bishop. He was the god of death, chained beneath the world by the others and left there for 1,000 years. And the only way he could still reach the world was through vessels, through chosen servants, through the red crown, and eventually through the last lamp. Which brings us to another very dark part of the story, the lamps. Because the game starts with our little lamb being taken to be sacrificed. And at first it is very quick, very dramatic, very, oh no, tiny cute creature is about to die. But the reason behind it is much worse. There was a prophecy. A lamp would become the promised liberation of the one who waits. A lamp would free Narinder. So the bishops decided the safest solution was to kill all the lamps. Very normal divine politics. Very reasonable. No overaction here. Just a little genocide to prevent a prophecy. And the worst part is that they almost succeeded. By the time the game began, there is only one lamp left, the final sacrifice, the last little piece of a prophecy the bishops tried to erase. Except they make one very small mistake. They kill the lamp in front of the god of death, which honestly seems like a questionable strategic decision, because the lamp dies, meets the one who waits, accepts the red crown, returns from death, and starts building a cult. And this is where Woolhalla begins. A tiny cult full of hungry, confused, emotionally unstable followers who share one collective brain cell. And somehow this tiny cult becomes the thing that destroys the old faith. Honestly, the bishops had every reason to be nervous. Because this lamp was not okay. And then we have Baal and Aym, the cats. At first, they look like Narinder's loyal guards, strange, dark, dangerous mini bosses standing between us and the one who waits. But their story is actually one of the saddest parts of the whole game. Bal and Aim are the sons of Forneus. They were taken from their mother and given to Narinder. Shamura was involved in this. And there is a line suggesting they were given to him so that he would be not lonely, which is a strange, heartbreaking detail, because suddenly these two are not just enemies. They are children who were taken away from their mother and raised in the darkness beside an imprisoned god of death. They became his guardians, his disciples, his loyal servants, and by the time we met them, they are ready to fight us for him. At first, I saw them as mini bosses, but after learning their story, they feel more like another tragedy caused by the bishop's decisions. They are part of the same broken system. Everyone in the story is trapped inside someone else's choice. The bishops are trapped by fear and all wounds. Narinder is trapped by betrayal, ambition, and imprisonment. Baal and Aym are trapped by loyalty and separation from their mother. And the lamp is trapped by a prophecy, a crown, a dead god, and my deeply questionable leadership. And that is what makes the story of Cult of the Lamp so much more interesting than it looks from the outside. Because on the surface, this is a cute cult management game. You build shelters, you cook meals, you unlock decorations, you clean pubs, you get your followers drunk, you hold a wedding, you unlocked a mating tent, you sacrifice weak followers to Midas because apparently that is just the kind of leader you are now. But underneath all of that, there is a story about gods destroying each other out of fear, about power, about devotion, about loneliness, about family turning against family, about the natural order being challenged, and about the terrible things people and gods are willing to do when they are afraid of losing control. And then after all of that, after defeating Leshy, after defeating Heket, after surviving Kalmar, after killing Shamura, after refusing to sacrifice myself, after fighting the one who waits and taking his power, some mysterious higher being appears, the one with question mark instead of name. And honestly, I could not decide whether to name him or just leave the question marks forever, because there is something funny about a cosmic entity showing up after the fall of an entire religion and just being called question mark, question mark, question mark. But then he basically said, "Congratulations on becoming the god of death. Now go fight all the bishops again and bring me their tears." And at that moment, I knew this was not a wise ancient guide. This was not a gentle cosmic mentor. This was another problem. So I named him Little Trollish because spiritually that felt correct. Imagine defeating gods, breaking an ancient religion, taking the power of death itself, and then some cosmic creature appears just to give you more chores. No, absolutely not. Little Trollish, that is his name now, and this is what I really love about Cult of the Lamp. It starts so simple. A teeny lamp is about to be sacrificed. A mysterious god saves them, a cult is born. And then somehow, several hours later, you are emotionally attached to your disaster flock, fighting wounded gods, questioning the morality of divine politics, and naming cosmic entities because they are annoying. Woolhalla started as a starving little cult full of idiots sharing one collective brain cell. We built beds, we upgraded the temple, we cooked questionable meals, we cleaned an unreasonable amount of poop. We resurrected followers, we held weddings, we made golden eggs, we have people, we gave people to meet us without hesitation. And somehow, through all of that, we ended up destroying the old faith and becoming the new god of death. Which sounds impressive, and you remember that half of my leadership strategy was panic and convenience. But still, the fierce gods are gone. The Federate Guardians failed to keep power untouched. The crowns were lost. The bishops rose without divine rights. The old faith ruled for thousands of years. Narinder tried to break that. His family chained him beneath the world. The lamp were slaughtered to stop a prophecy, and one tiny doomed lamp came back from death and ruined everybody's plan. So while the game is cute, funny, and absolutely ridiculous, I think this is why it stayed with me. Because behind all of this chaos, there is a very sad story about broken gods and the things they sacrificed. Leshy lost his sight, Heket lost her voice, Kalmar lost his hearing, Shamura lost their mind, Narinder lost his freedom, Baal and Aym lost their mother, and the lamp, well, the lamp lost any chance of having a normal life. But honestly, After everything Woolhalla has done, I have seen worse leadership. Oh, thank you very much for watching, and maybe see you in the next episode of Cult of the Lamp.